Women's sports are having a moment. You've probably noticed the surging interest in the WNBA driven by players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and former Yukon star Paige Beckers. But the WNBA is not the only women's sports league that's seeing more interest. From Connecticut Public Radio, this is Where We Live. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're looking at the growing world of women's sports. Later in the hour, we hear from a women's rugby coach about the surge of interest in that sport. But first, let's start with soccer. Our guest is a star goalkeeper from the U.S. women's national team in the National Women's Soccer League. Goalkeeper Alyssa Naeher joins us. She's a Connecticut native and part of the U.S. World Cup win in 2019. In 2024, she won an Olympic gold medal. She plays for Chicago Stars FC, and this Sunday, the U.S. women's national team will honor Alyssa at a ceremony in East Hartford ahead of a game against Portugal. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, and so I want to start off by talking about the fact that you announced your retirement from international soccer last year. Curious to hear, what led up to that decision?
It was a number of things. I think I've been very fortunate to be part of the team and the organization for a very long time, was able to play in a number of, world championship tournaments. And, just with our sport is all very cyclical. And by that, I mean, obviously, every 4 years there's a World Cup, Olympics, right, and things like that. So, finishing at the Olympics, there's not another major tournament. Obviously, there's things that are in between, but no major tournament until, another 4 years. Obviously, my age plays a factor for sure in terms of how the body feels.
Sure.
But yeah, it just felt like the right time.
Right.
We started the coaching transition with Emma coming in just before the Olympics, and yeah, it just felt like a lot of the older players were kind of moving on. They were going younger, and we were very much in, kind of flipping the page to a new generation. And for me, it felt right. It felt like the right timing. Felt like it was just the right timing.
Right. And new page for new players, but also new page for you as well, even though you're sort of ending this one in some ways. And as we talked about earlier, or mentioned earlier, that you will be honored by the U.S. women's national team on October 26th here in Connecticut and at the team's game against Portugal. So how are you feeling going into that ceremony? Does anything feel different? Are you excited? What's going through your mind?
I'm excited. It's going to be different. Normally when I'm, scheduled, trying to coordinate, tickets and different things with my family, I'm also having to focus on playing in the game.
Right.
So this is a little bit different to not, have that responsibility of playing. So I get to be, in the suite with my family, for the game, which I think will be really fun, and kind of share that with them. But yeah, I'm really excited. I think to be able to have that recognition in, home state. A lot of family and friends will be at the game. So yeah, I think it's going to be probably a little bit overwhelming, I'm sure.
Right.
I'm sure there's to be a lot of emotions into it, but no, I'm very much looking forward to it.
I wanted to ask, have you ever been on that side of the field, or is this one of the first times that you'll be doing that, watching the game with your family?
Yeah, I've never watched it with my family. I've gone to a couple of the other players' retirement ceremonies in the last couple of years. So, or I guess in the last year. So I have watched the team play live before, but not necessarily with my family in the stands next to me.
Well, that'll be a fun first. And you mentioned Connecticut being your home state, and so the retirement ceremony is happening here. So it must be mixed emotions with a lot of excitement going on. Is this where you first started playing soccer?
It was, yeah, down in Trumbull.
Wow. How did that come about? Was it something that you knew that you wanted to be a part of, or do you remember that first moment? Maybe, this is kind of cliche, but maybe kicking the ball and made you really excited, or do you have first memories of when you realized this was going to be your thing?
It started pretty young. I think it was 5 when my twin sister and I played together. But my dad was a basketball coach. He was the athletic director at in school. So I always loved, sports being around. I mean, I've got videos of me dribbling a basketball at like 18 months old. So we always just like loved playing sports and having fun. So I don't remember necessarily, it wasn't like any type of like aha moment, I don't think. But
it's just a part of your life.
Just, you just play, and I think it's great for kids to get into sports. I think you just learn so much about, social interactions, and you learn about other people and, different experiences. So I think it's great to get into youth sports for any kid, whatever sport that ends up being. But yeah, for us, it was just soccer it's usually the easiest at that age too, because you kind of just put the ball around and let people run around.
Right.
But yeah, it was, Trumbull, Connecticut.
I love hearing you talk about sort of the origin stories, because as you were sharing that, I was kind of imagining myself, because I also played a lot of sports growing up, but I was not super duper competitive. So I never had, dreams of going into the game professionally, but I really like the camaraderie. I really like hanging out with my friends and just kind of having a good time. And it sounds like you did too, sort of growing up. And now that you've been playing for most of your life, you were enjoying it for fun as a kid, but you've been playing it professionally. So what do you love most about the game? Is it the competition, the camaraderie, or maybe a mix of all of that?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, honestly. I think I definitely am a very, very competitive person. Even playing board games as a family growing up, competition turned, we turned everything into a competition. But I definitely think that having something to compete for, having something to strive for in terms of, I'll be honest, I'm not necessarily like a huge, a goal-making person necessarily. Like I'm not like write my goals down in a list, but obviously I have certain things that I've wanted to, you chase after throughout a career in terms of just having goals. So I think having something to try to, accomplish is definitely a piece of it that is a driving factor. But I definitely think that the camaraderie of being on a team sport, again, I think we all kind of grow up in our own, little bubbles, little worlds. And I think that being part of a sport, you get to meet people that you would never really have crossed paths with. You have very different upbringings, different beliefs, different, values, different everything, that all of a sudden now you're sitting around a dinner table and just having conversation and learning about people, learning about how, different people think. And I think all those healthy conversations and, just having that, again, a team goal of something that you can accomplish together. And it's, I think a lot of my favorite memories, even looking back over my career, is even just, the birthday dinners or going out to coffee or, hanging out in the hotel and just kind of being part of the team. So the camaraderie side of it is definitely a huge factor.
Well, and I love that you kind of started with talking about how you would make some goals, and that was just kind of you as a person on your own. But then you eventually kind of grew into where you're in a team where everyone has maybe individual goals, but ultimately you're kind of working towards the same goal together, right? Whether you're aiming to win a game or maybe improve your game. So when you decided that you were going to go into soccer, when did you first start playing goalkeeper? What drew you to that position specifically?
I always loved playing basketball growing up. It was probably my first passion. So for me, it was just fun to, put the gloves on and get to do something, kind of play, use my hands and that. So I started pretty early, and then just kind of started training specifically maybe when I was 10 or 12, somewhere around there.
I wanted to talk more details about what it means to be playing as a keeper, because it's a role with a lot of pressure, especially when a game comes down to penalty kicks. And you mentioned earlier that you're a very competitive person. You enjoy a competitive game, whether it's on the field or on the table. Do you enjoy that sense of pressure too? Because I feel like oftentimes either we're driven away from it or we're driven towards it, because if you do overcome that pressure, it could be worth it.
Yeah, I don't know that it's I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't say that I necessarily seek the pressure. I think
Sure.
what I have done in my career is you learn to. I'm certainly not afraid of it. Don't back down from the pressure. But I think for me, rather than kind of chasing after it or seeking it, it's been more of a learning how to manage it and kind of play and almost embrace the pressure, because it's just part of the game. It's part of, if you want to play at a high level, there's pressure is a huge part of that. But I think for me, it's more of just embracing it along the way rather than specifically seeking it out or anything like that.
Right. And kind of building on that, is this something that is talking about the pressure and you're mentioning about managing it? Is there a way to prepare for those moments, or do you think your training sort of throughout your life, whether or not you're playing basketball or soccer, it all kind of helps you or helped you lead into that moment where you're facing the pressure?
I think for me, it's always been the more prepared I felt, then I could, it didn't feel, I always at least knew and felt confident that I had done everything that I could do to be ready for the moment. That obviously doesn't always guarantee, that it's going to go your way or that there's going to be success. But I think being able to manage the pressure is, for me, just being as prepared as I can possibly be so I won't be surprised by anything. And then it's more of the focus on the execution and trying to do that. But I think it just kind of comes over time.
Well, I wonder too, since your position as a keeper, you're kind of there on your own, but not really at the same time, because you're playing with a team. So do you think it's helpful to know that your team players are also out there for you and you are for them, to sort of help manage that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to be able to, look around and have people that you trust and you believe in them, that they've got your back as well. You don't feel very alone out there, which certainly helps a lot.
Well, and so as we mentioned earlier in the hour that you're retiring from international play, but not from the sport, of course, and you still play for Chicago Stars FC, and in fact, you recently scored your first goal in the National Women's Soccer League, so congratulations on that. Looking ahead to the rest of your career, are there other milestones that you're hoping to achieve? Are you kind of busting out that goals list again and putting down new goals?
I think one thing that I'm probably most proud of in my career, just the longevity of it, to be able to play and compete at a high level for, this many years is something that I'm very proud of. I think the one thing that I don't have yet, I don't have, an NWSL championship. So I think that would be something obviously that continues in the motivation for that regards. But I wouldn't say, I don't think that there's any necessarily milestones to be hitting along the way, but I would love to win at one point.
Absolutely. And there's been so much movement, I think, and things that are happening in women's sports. And recently, WNBA players have been speaking out about their pay. And you are part of the U.S. women's national team, their team's fight for equal pay as well. Can you tell our listeners, where that fight stands today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's continuing to improve. I know, even, seeing what the salaries of, young players in our league now, compared to what, my rookie salary would have been 15 years ago is, I think we still do have a long ways to go, but it's definitely moving in the right direction. And I think it's just about the investment, and it's not just the dollars and cents necessarily. I think the investment comes also in, training facilities and field conditions and, the way you travel or the way that what your day-to-day lived experience is. And I think that's still where we have, ways to improve. I think if you look around our league, a number of the teams have started, they've built, their own state-of-the-art, training facilities that you can come into work and you've got everything that you need right there. There's other organizations that haven't gotten quite there yet, and a work in progress. And I think that to me is where we as, I think in women's sports specifically, it's just the overall level of investment that needs to continue. And it's a collaboration. I mean, we need to work well with our teams, with our organizations. And, I think if you want to be a successful organization, it takes everybody kind of getting on the same page. But yeah, I think that there's definitely been improvement, but we need to keep pushing for sure.
Well, and as the pushing continues, and I think this might be a different kind of camaraderie, looking at it this way. How does it feel watching other leagues deal with the same issue? Do you have any advice for them? Do you feel not necessarily better, but knowing that other people are sort of dealing with the same problems, that you can kind of work together and figure out a way to solve them?
Yeah, I think the way I've always tried to look at it, any advice, even, I try to give some of our younger players as well, is always trying to, specify and identify a problem. You can sit there and say things like, oh, this isn't good enough or this is bad. But it's like, okay, let's take a step back. Like, why is this bad? What is bad? And how can we, because you can't, those types of things, once you can name and identify, it becomes a more tangible thing that you can try to fix. And I think there's a difference of, complaining to complain and also pointing out where we need to be better. And I don't think that's a bad thing to be pointing out and identifying the insufficient areas. But I think it does matter kind of how you go about it, how you identify it, and then wanting to try to be part of the solution as well.
Right.
And not just, again, it's not just complaining to complain. It's, no, there's a reason why we're identifying there's a reason why this needs to be better. There's a reason why this isn't good enough. And I think that helps as you obviously try to progress.
Right. And it seems like what you just shared is a philosophy that you can put on other life things, right? Not just on the field, but
sure.
Yeah, it's just a really great sort of general life advice. Be part of the solution. And as we mentioned earlier, there's so much movement going on in this space, and the U.S. Women's soccer fandom really swelled after your 2019 World Cup win. But your career started years before that. So what did the changing interest in the sport mean for you and other players? Seeing it kind of, I don't want to say a resurgence, but there's so much interest now.
Yeah, I think it's been really cool and to be a part of, seeing the growth from a fan perspective. And I think obviously what helped is, winning definitely helps because it just draws more attention to your sport. It draws more attention to the, different tournaments and things. I think that's what's unique about our game is unlike, American sports leagues. This is something that happens every 4 years when you're doing a World Cup or an Olympics. So I think that there's that element of it as well that is, you've got something very specific. You don't get to do it or see it every year. So when you do then get to watch it, you're like very much invested. And I think it's just, you see, and the more that players have, longevity on those teams, you've got people that become fans of players, not just the team. And then you've got, once you become a fan of a player, then you also start rooting for the team. And sometimes it's in reverse. Sometimes you're a fan of a team first, and then you pick your favorite players and kind of go from there. But I think that's been really something fun to watch over the years as well, is just how so many people have embraced the team and the players. Which has been very cool.
Well, and of course, you're retired from international play, but not play in general. Do you see yourself or find yourself in your position today? Are you a fan yourself of the sport, or are you still the player, or are you both?
I think I'm right now probably still player. I think obviously you watch other games to, as part of your league, you're playing week in and week out, so you want to know kind of and be prepared for who you're going to be playing against. But I think right now I'm kind of so locked into it that it's definitely more player mindset. It has been fun to watch the national team games in the last year. Definitely can say a fan of that team. and it's been fun to watch them, continue to succeed. But I think right now it would be more locked in as a player still.
Right, and we're really excited to see what you do next here too. And I know you earlier you mentioned a little bit some advice for younger people in terms of being a part of solution and not complaining just to complain. But specifically to sports, what kind of advice do you have for younger people, especially women who are looking into sports at any level?
I think just for me, it's kind of just enjoy it all. Don't take anything for granted.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the fact that I've gotten to, play a game for a living is kind of incredible. And I think that's why, that's obviously whatever sport, men's or women's, it's part of entertaining and all of that. But it's, again, like I said before, I think the longevity of my career is something that I'm proud of, because you never really know when it could be over.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, your career doesn't get beyond college, and that's okay. For some people, you play 20 years professionally, and that's great too. And I think that just being present and enjoying it, and just, even if I'm having a bad day, I'm all of a sudden, I'm like, the sun is shining. I'm standing outside, running around playing a game,
right.
And it's sometimes it's just like kind of brings you back to that a little bit. Obviously, there's always going to be the hard days and frustrating moments and things like that. But
right.
Yeah, I think just not taking any of it for granted and enjoying every part of it.
Well, that seems like another good piece of advice in general, enjoying the moment and just being present. You've been listening to Alyssa Naeher, who is an American professional soccer player and Connecticut native. She currently plays for Chicago Stars FC. She was also part of the U.S. women's national team from 2014 to 2024, winning a World Cup in 2019 and a gold medal at the 2024 Paris Olympics. Alyssa, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, let us know if you watched women's rugby during last year's Olympics. We would love to hear from you, because next we hear from the coach who worked with that sport's biggest star. So give us a call if you watched a rugby game. Join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Last year, during the Summer Olympics, one rugby player made waves. Her name is Alyssa Naeher. You may recognize her from the rugby field, or from social media where she has millions of followers, or from Dancing with the Stars, or from the new Barbie that was made in her likeness. What you may not know is that this rugby star grew as an athlete here in our home state, where she played at Quinnipiac University under their women's rugby head coach, Becky Carlson. Coach Carlson joins us today. This is her 15th season with that team. Coach Carlson, welcome to Where We Live.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate you having me on.
Of course. And let us know, listeners, if you have any questions about rugby, because we certainly do. And we also want to hear from you. Join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, Coach Carlson, we just heard from goalkeeper Alyssa Naeher offering some advice to other athletes around identifying problems, but also enjoying being in the present, which I think is advice that we could use really life in general, on and off the field. So, Coach Carlson, before we turn to rugby, did you have any reactions to that conversation with Alyssa and what she shared?
I absolutely did. I'm glad that you asked, because what Alyssa was speaking about in terms of it not always being about dollars, we think about support for the women's game, and we automatically think that leads to some type of fiscal contribution to the sport. But there's other resources outside of that, which is game day support, marketing, education on the history of the players, so the fans know who they're cheering for and why. And if you look at the way that professional men's programs market their stats to their fans, this is a big game because they're about to reach a milestone for a certain number of points in their career. how you couch those stats to be exciting and interesting, the color for the games, the knowledge of the commentators and the knowledge that they possess about the game and the athletes is really critical. You're not going to catch a fan base holding on to wanting to tune in again if the commentator doesn't understand the sport, if they don't understand the language that is accompanied by it, and how it differs from the men's, if that is the case. So it all adds up to making it marketable to grow the base and connect with the fans. So I think I can even tie that into talking a little bit about Ilona's experience here at Quinnipiac.
No, absolutely. And it seems like the camera catches the truth no matter what you're doing, right? If you're not enthusiastic or knowledgeable, we as the audience know and all of that. So it's interesting to hear that it plays out for many, many spaces. And you've also played rugby before becoming coach, which I also imagine would be a really important element in terms of the coaching sphere. And rugby has traditionally not been a very popular sport here in the United States. So can we start by describing what rugby looks like for our listeners?
What does rugby look like? It looks like a combination of option football. We always say it has the grace of soccer, the speed of track, and the power of football. It's women's rugby. It's a whole new ball game. So we market it in that way to get people to understand that there is grace and power, much like you hear Ilona talk about, brains, beauty, all the things. So it's an exciting game to watch. It's very physical. There's multiple positions that most people would normally try to equate with football, but when you watch it, if you don't understand those positions, it can take people by surprise, and often people say, "What's going on out there?"
That'd be me.
That's okay. And we do love when people ask those questions, because it's the only way that you spark that further intrigue for people to say, I don't know what I'm watching, but I would like to know more.
Right. It's not really something you can read from a textbook or a manual, like, oh, this player plays this. You kind of have to watch it live.
Absolutely. There's the whole rugby for dummies concept really doesn't exist. It's something you have to immerse yourself in and really watching and understanding and buffing up your game IQ.
Does that actually exist, Rugby for Dummies? I can see the cover.
I think it does. I think there's got to be a dummies book for every single sport.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I should probably go get a copy anyway. But and then talking about sort of like playing the field, you also played tennis competitively throughout college, and but you got interested in rugby while being an undergraduate. So tell us how you got started with that and what drew you to the sport.
So I was a tennis player at the University of West Virginia, and that was back when the University of West Virginia was still participating in the Big East Conference. So our foes were University of Maryland. And tennis was a sport that I'd played my entire life. And my brother was a tennis player. He's the captain of Ohio State's tennis team. My sister was a captain of the University of Pittsburgh. So it made a nice little triangle for my parents to visit. And it suited them quite well. But I realized really quickly that I didn't want to be a singular athlete. I wanted to be a double sport athlete. And I came across an article in USA Today that said that Eastern Illinois University was out in the middle of Charleston, Illinois, adding the first NCAA Division I women's program in the country. And I said, what is that? I contacted the coach after I got my release from my coaches. Let's not think there was anything going on there. And I said, I want to know more about this. And as I was out on a visit with that coach, the tennis coach was also there. And the tennis coach said, hey, you can do both of these things here. It was a mid-major Division I. It was not a Power 5 by any means. So I had the flexibility to do that, which is why I wanted to do it. So I kind of went from hitting serves to hitting people. And it was an interesting transition, but I did both in the same season. And this was way before they were ever keeping track of student athlete hours, because now you can't go over 20. I was well over 20 every single week.
Well, hitting serves to hitting people, that's certainly a bumper sticker. And one of my really good friends is a rugby player, and she spends so many hours explaining to me the game. And then quite frankly, I don't have the brain to really connect the rules, but I enjoy watching it. But she has broken her collarbone about 3 times. So it feels like this is on par with the sport. And especially since you became a player and now you're a coach. So as a coach, what would you say draws women to the sport of rugby? Why do they want to play this sport?
I think there's so much to be said all around the country for decades. You've had something called the powder puff football game, where for one day there's that rotation with the males doing cheer, and then the females do football. And it's not a joke to a lot of the females that put the pads on and they play, and they're like, wait a minute, this is a sport I might like. This is something that I might be interested in. And there's a lot of athletes who come from other sports. Our mainstream sports are very intense, and you've seen just the change in youth sports from the pressures and a lot of the financial difficulties that families have in funding this pay-to-play atmosphere that we've created. And rugby is a much cheaper sport, and it's available, and it's the only full contact sport for women in the NCAA. There are NCAA scholarship opportunities in it, and it's something more than just giving them one day a weekend to participate as a joke. It is giving them an entirely different sport that is full contact, that they don't have to play year-round soccer. They don't have to play their sports year-round. There is an opportunity to play something else, and they usually grab it and they hold on to it. And they're grabbing it and holding on to it a lot more since Ilona Maher.
Right. And sort of the development going from it being a joke to it being very serious. When was the first time you thought about coaching? What made you become interested in that?
I went right to being a coach as soon as I graduated in grad school. I went right to being a coach. I was out in a small school in Fairham, Virginia. I was coaching. I was the assistant lacrosse coach. I did strength and conditioning for the soccer team. I would hit out fly balls to the women's softball team. I did so many things and wore many hats, and I helped out with sports information there. And then my coach at EIU said, hey, we have an opening, a grad position, come back. And then I was an assistant coach there. And then I went on to be the emerging sports program manager at USA Rugby to lead the NCAA in the emerging sports initiative to gain more teams, which is what we have now. We went from 1 to 27 today.
Wow,
so that was
amazing.
my mission. Yes, that was my mission back then, and it still is.
Well, and I just want our listeners to know that Coach Carlson is literally wearing a hat today as we're having this conversation. So she's right. She wears many hats, and she is wearing one literally. And so I'm really curious to hear about your philosophy of coaching, because having gone through many coaches in my own life in school, I often think about how it's a lot of work on the field or on the court, but also a lot of time spent off of the field or off of the court. So what was that like for you? What is that like for you in terms of coaching philosophy?
I don't even remember what it was like for me anymore, because what it is like for all coaches now is completely faded so much of that out. And the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, with all the conversations surrounding NIL and paying athletes, and those conversations has changed everything dramatically. And I don't just mean financially for student athletes and for coaches. Philosophically, it's changed us all. And it's had us look at what are the opportunities we haven't been giving student athletes? What do they have an abundance of now? And where does the message fall when you are hired to bring together a group of people of your choosing and recruit them to a university to go to class, hopefully get good grades and strive for those good grades, but also play a sport that they love? Meanwhile, the message in college athletics is care about yourself, take care of your brand, and educate yourself on how you can make more money and you can be more visible. So you have coaches like myself on one end that are like, let's all come together and be selfless. And then the marketing message is isolate, take care of your own. So it is I don't remember what it used to be like unless I really sit down and think about those parts. Because if you sit too long, well, this is the way that it used to be, then, as you said earlier, just really the present, being present for it and trying to figure out how we are going to negotiate and navigate our way through this. So that is definitely something that every coach in this profession struggles with at the moment.
So because the financial piece is such a huge part of the conversation, and like you mentioned, it's not something that was really talked about, say, a decade ago or so. And when we think about coaching, we often think about during the game, during training, during practice. But it sounds like more and more of your job is actually off the field.
It has. We joke about this all the time about coaching. The X's and the O's part of it has shrunk to about 15 to 20% of the actual job, with all of the conversations surrounding mental wellness, surrounding their participation and their civic duties as citizens and athletes. We have thrown so much into the mix of what the responsibilities are of our athletes and coaches. The sport has faded a little bit in the background, maybe not at the Power Fives as much, but we see that shift at the mid-major Division 1 level, Division 2 and Division 3s for sure. So it's not an easy it's not been an easy transition, and I watched a lot of my own colleagues all around other sports that have said this is not for me, and I've done what I can do in giving back to my program, and I'm going to try something else. And so it is an everyday ongoing battle.
Well, and sort of building on that question before we go to break, this is also your 15th year coaching at Quinnipiac, but you've been coaching for around 20 years or so. So how have you seen your program and the sport change in that time period?
Well, we obviously have way more teams to play than we did when we initially came in, with several teams in the Ivies and military academies of Navy and Army. That has expanded a lot. But what I have seen, I've seen a vast number of athletes come in with a heavier weight on their shoulders in terms of comparison and expectation. There was a time when our athletes came in and they just had to play, and then they came off the field and they absorbed whether they won or lost. And then we moved on to the next. And that we tend to sit in those things now, and those results, because we are defining a lot of our athletes by who they are as athletes instead of who they are as people. And that's one thing that will not change within our program. That will not be part of it. But I know that is definitely something that has changed over the last 15 years, where you used to go out and just play.
Right.
And do your best. And now I'm looking on Instagram at other teams. Who's having more fun than we are? What does the roster look like? It's all things that weren't previously available. That is a heavier weight on the athletes that we have now.
Well, that's something that we will certainly be talking more about in a little bit. And we've also mentioned Ilomar earlier, too. We will be talking about her as well with Becky Carlson, who's a women's rugby head coach at Quinnipiac University. And we'll be back with more of Coach Carlson after a short break. So let us know if you have any questions about coaching or rugby. Join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. We're joined by Coach Becky Carlson. She's women's rugby head coach at Quinnipiac University. And we just heard a bit about Coach Carlson's coaching philosophy and the evolution of the NCAA women's rugby. And now we're going to look ahead to some issues of equity in women's sports and what's ahead for Coach Carlson and her team. So, Coach, we mentioned Ilona Marr a couple of times in our introduction and in our previous conversation. So for listeners who aren't familiar, could you tell us a bit more about her?
Well, you could head to your nearest Instagram and type that in, and about a million searches will come up. But Ilona is a Quinnipiac grad from 2018 who picked up rugby later in her high school career and ended up attending Norwich University her first year and then transferred to Quinnipiac. And she was a staple and a force and change in the game when she was here. And it is no surprise that she went on to the Olympics, several Olympics. But the biggest one that you would know is the bronze medal that she received in 2024 at the Olympics. And she has just been everywhere. She's been on Dances with the Stars. She has been, she's in your feed. She's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She's won an ESPY. There is really, I don't know how much is left on the bucket list. So, but more importantly than the accolades is her message. And she's talked a lot about body positivity in the sport of rugby and just getting people to become interested in the only full contact sport for women in the NCAA.
I mean, I did see you were smiling when we were listing out all of the things that she was a part of with the millions, from the millions of followers to becoming a Barbie. And I know you mentioned earlier too, to not compare yourself, but man, when I was reading her CV, essentially, I'm like, how did you do all of that and go to school and do all of the things? So I think just kind of building on that, what was it like for you watching your former player out on the global stage in such a fashion?
So many, I think so many proud and so many emotional moments that go along with that whole journey, especially seeing after their performance what that was like in 2020 and them not coming away with medaling in that. And watching the comeback from that, I think was more beautiful than the medal itself because of the story that's behind that journey and how that's not the stuff that makes it onto social media, how our female athletes battle back from more so the explosion of attention that they had from the first Olympics and having to go home and not take the medal home and then sit in that for another 4 years and be training with that in mind, that you never want that to happen again. And it was clear that they had that in mind when they won the bronze medal and persevered against Australia. But it's those moments, I think, that I'll hold on to more than some of the moments that shine a pretty big light on what success looks like, as if it just appeared out of thin air.
And I mean, this is kind of a big, broad question, and I think part of what you just said answers this question a bit. But what has she meant for the sport? I can't imagine sort of the explosion of her into the forefront allows more and more people to learn about the sport and perhaps want to be a part of it.
There has never been anyone that has stood on an SB stage and said, "Hey, watch the next women's rugby game." She has reached so many milestones and has broken so many glass ceilings on the side of not just rugby, but the ability for female athletes to say, it's okay to be funny. It's okay for you to be a little bit unserious when it comes to showing the world who you are. And she does that. She shows the world who she is outside of just the pitch. And that's really important. It goes back to what we were talking about. The world holds on to who she is as a person, and it's the bonus that she plays rugby and is so strong and fast and just has a work ethic that is unmatched in so many ways. And all the things that she did to get there. People often ask me, what did you do at Quinnipiac? And how did you do? I didn't do anything. The work when you have an athlete like Ilona and a natural athlete, you can coach that player, but every single player that you have on the team has the opportunity to do the same things that she was doing, but she did extra. You talk about the schedule, nursing, and all the things that she was doing. Every single time she had to miss for a clinical, she was back in the gym pushing sleds and grabbing ropes and squatting and benching and doing all of those things extra. Anyone in this country can go and play their sport for 2.5 hours and do strength and conditioning. It doesn't make them an Olympic champion. She did all of that stuff. That had nothing to do with our staff. We gave her the opportunity to come to Quinnipiac and use the resources that we had, but that is 100% her.
Well, and I think you raise a really good point in terms of giving the opportunity. I want to take a moment to share a comment that we received from Erin in Deep River here in Connecticut, just talking about opportunity, because she shared with us that she's really excited that we're talking about rugby today. She also did rugby in college and was slow at running, but they saw a position for me, which was awesome. So that's awesome, Erin, because that really shows the opportunities, coach, that you were just mentioning now. But she has a question because there is a Grays team for older men, but there's not a Grays team for older women. Why is that? I would love if there was one. Do you have an answer to that, coach?
I don't have an answer, but start one. I don't know why that is, but it takes people in order to start that. I think a lot of In a lot of instances, we look to there to be broader organizations to take on these types of challenges where there is not an opportunity, when it takes one person just like Aaron to say, hey, why don't we?
Right.
Have you ever thought about? That's really critical. I don't know specifically the answer to that question.
Sure, no, but that's
it.
another great moment of action is to start one, and just really quickly too, because Aaron shared with us that the Shoreline Rugby in Clinton is trying to recruit girls, especially younger girls, before they get into soccer and lacrosse. So it's a great time to get them excited about the sport. So appreciate you, Aaron, taking the time and sharing that story with us, and I can help you sort of spread the word. And so as we're continuing talking about rugby, and we mentioned that 15th season as a coach at Quinnipiac, kind of a big deal. What are you hoping to see in the next 15 years, fingers crossed, of women's NCAA rugby, especially knowing that there's so much momentum right now for the sport?
It will sound, I don't know how this is going to sound, but I'm going to say it because I do hope in that 15 years that there is an NCAA rugby championship that is happening. I will be in my 60s by the time that happens. And I hope that I don't get into the stadium. I hope that there are not enough tickets and I'm outside going, hey, I was once somebody, can I get in, please? Like, I would love it if it was just too full for the likes of the people that started it, because we can pass the baton. And that would be the ultimate goal for us to be able to establish championship status as an NCAA sport. And I think with the Olympics in LA in 2028 and the reappearance of sevens for the women's game will be another wave. It should be another wave. And it will depend heavily on whether or not USA Rugby as a national governing body grabs onto that and rides that wave. So I think we're in for good things in the next 15 years.
Right. And hopefully that wave will continue. And a shorter term goal and a shorter baton, I think, is what's next for you and your team?
What's next for us? What's next for our team is the bigger goal. It's October, and everywhere in college sports right now, athletes of every single sport are exhausted. They have midterms. They aren't sleeping enough. They're not hydrated enough. They are sharing dorms and getting sick and trading sicknesses and all that. And then in the midst of that, we're asking them to come out and tackle people and maintain a solid GPA. So what's next for our team in this short goal? Stay healthy, stay well, stay connected, stay grateful. I think all of those things are very difficult in October, especially for a fall sport. So if you have those things as a coach in October, you're winning.
That's amazing. I feel like we're getting so much advice for both on the field and off the field, and it clearly sees how connected we are with sports in real life. Thank you so much. I want to thank our guest today, Becky Carlson, who's the women's rugby head coach at Quinnipiac University. Coach Carlson, really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks, Catherine. Appreciate you.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Lily Tyson with support from Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Thank you all so much for listening, and also listen to Coach Carlson and stay healthy, everyone.